Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Good day and Assalamu alaikum everyone. I'm Shahid Hassan from International Medical University, Malaysia. And first of all, I would like to thank Professor Mulazim Bukhari and team for inviting me to this certificate course in research and medical writing on behalf of the AJK, MC, SIVU and UHS as their joint program. Let me have a disclaimer here that I am not a statistician, rather an educator from health profession education participating in this program as an instructor. The topic assigned to me is an overview of quantitative research, survey design and educational research. The topic is very much pertinent and close to my heart, and I would like to feel very much pleased to deliver and interact with all the participants who are the senior faculty from their respective disciplines and professions. As the topic suggests, it is going to be delivered in 2 rather than 3 parts. The part 1 is delivered as voice over recorded asynchronous session, which is going on now, on overview of the quantitative research, focus being survey in terms of research, design and educational research. Part 2 will be asynchronous, of course, as your self-assessment using data in some of the SAQ-based assignments available on e-portal on LMS. In first 2 parts, I am not directly supervising this session and will join you in part 3, which is a synchronous session based on a demonstration as how to validate a questionnaire-based survey. Hope you all are going to enjoy this part 3, since designing and developing a questionnaire is very much part of the educational research these days. The learning outcomes and the cognitive load of each learning outcome mentioned with Bloom's taxonomy are: number 1, define research and research design from methodological approaches. Number 2, differentiate quantitative and qualitative approaches in research. Number 3, describe survey in educational research for descriptive design. Number 4, develop and design questionnaire using Likert scale for survey. And finally, demonstrate a survey design research from validation to usability. Let's revise our course with the definition of research, as you all can read here. Research is a creative and systemic work undertaken to explore an issue with scientific evidences that involves collection, organization, analysis of information in a predefined study design. So the study design provides the overall umbrella under which all these terms you will come across time and again. And according to the Bredenton, research has 3 basic ingredients: the exploratory, descriptive and explanatory research. And under these 3 categories, there could be various types of the research design that I am going to make your concepts clear, why there are different categories and research designs that often confuses the beginners in research design and methodology. Research in terms of approaches can be categorized into quantitative, qualitative, and mixed research. The quantitative research that often we call research involving a scale measure usually are associated with empirical, social, scientific approaches for measurement such as survey, case studies, or experiment. On the other hand, qualitative research involves collection of data in the form of words or text, or even images or the diagram or the figures or the pictures. The data collection techniques include observation, which can be documentation of the real events, focus group interviews, interpretation of the written documents or visual images, and in-depth interview. Finally, the mixed method would involve the data using mixed methods such as the combination of the quantitative and qualitative research design, but there has to be a justification why a researcher wants to combine these two methods, and in case if it is necessary, an expert should be engaged right at the time of preparing the proposal. Let me talk briefly about the quantitative research, which is the topic of this asynchronous session. The quantitative research is the collection and analysis of the numeric data to describe, explain, predict, or control phenomena of interest in research. At its outset, the quantitative research states the hypothesis, rather than we start with the research problem and generating a question, followed by hypothesis to be tested and research procedure to be specified to carry out the study. It is also possible to control the confounders and select the data statistically sound and generalizable, because it all depends on how much representative the sample is to be generalizable. Sample size and sampling methods are identified, and there are two different approaches in research, and statistical tools are well defined to make sample results reflective of the population. Since we have moved from research to quantitative research, let's find out the basic ingredients of quantitative research, followed by research design and its types. So the basic quantitative research ingredients are exploratory research, explanatory research, and the descriptive research. In exploratory research, we explore a research problem that we know nothing about it or very little about it, and this is often a qualitative research that provides basis for the further research. Descriptive research, in this we know about the subject matters and we want to research further with more accurate decision making and addressing the gaps in already existing published research and literature. Descriptive studies are often quantitative, but it can be qualitative as well. Explanatory research is a causal or predictive research that aims to explain the cause and effect relationship among the independent and the dependent variables. To build a quantitative research project, we need to build a conducive research environment that considers approaches in terms of quantitative, qualitative, or mixed research. Then the design, which looks at the overall planning and research demand, methodology that involves the data collection, data analysis, and statistical tool. And then it is also important to have the area of research to be decided under the umbrella of the social sciences, medical education, or lab-based. And the most important thing is the researcher's interest, strength, expertise, current practices, and gap in knowledge that one has intended to research to provide further information to literature on the subject area that one is researching. In terms of when and why in research, the research starts with the research problem, which generate a research question. Then one designs or develop the research objective, learning the research learning outcomes, and then overall we then plan it under the research design, how to collect data, how to implement the entire research plan, from collecting data analysis to interpretation, and the research outcome. So the function of the research design is to ensure that the evidences obtained enable us to answer research question as unambiguously and clearly as possible. This will ensure the reliability and the validity of the research outcome, which is very important. And of course, also we must keep a focus on generalizability of the research, and that part would be considered when we are developing or deciding on the sample size and the sampling method, which I'm sure one of the speaker have covered those areas. But only thing you have to remember that the sample size and the sampling methods are two entirely different things. In laying the foundation of research process, we need to identify a research problem, generate questions, and then determine the objective goal of the research, then decide on the design in terms of collection of data analysis, finding and implication in terms of result, and then having a research outcome which will have a suggestion and recommendations to address the research question and to draw the conclusion. But all this while in the process, we need to have direction and the focus. The background study, objective, and the title has to be determined, and the literature review has to be thoroughly done to identify the gaps that you intend to do research on those gaps area, and then share with the global community. The data and its sources has to be determined, technique of the data gathering in terms of method, and then variables, measurement, sampling method, stages of the analysis and analysis technique, and the statistics should be very clearly defined and used. Now let's take up step by step about the quantitative research. We start with a research problem, generate a question which has to be ultimately answered towards the outcome of the research. But throughout this question that we are doing research on should focus on destination, research content, and the outcome. A research process ends with the outcome expected from the research. So putting them down into a flow chart for your convenience, as shown here, identifying the problem or the issue, developing a research question, generating the hypothesis, determining the goal and objectives, deciding the design method, collecting the data, analyzing the data, then compiling the results, drawing a conclusion, and then the research outcome in terms of making some recommendations. So first thing first, identifying the research problem as the gaps in knowledge with so far published research studies. So the gaps in knowledge, those are not answered by the literature, and your research finding can help to fill up this gap, can be your research problem. Something that has not fully researched yet. So that provides you a gap to do research using that gaps in published literature. However, a problem must be clearly and precisely stated and has the capability to be addressed by the available resources. In doing so, one may consider developing the new instruments, model, or phenomena, or addressing what has been published, but there some ambiguity still lies in literature. Revision, extension of the instruments of the model, revision or the test of the theories and methods, enhancement of the existing research, and any other creation or innovation can be part of one's research. Must be done with a specific and significant enough purpose that helps institutions, stakeholders, industries needs in terms of technology advancements. From here we move to formulating the research question. Hypothesis being the part of the scientific research method, a research question is the researcher's curiosity about the world that he wants to answer towards the end of the research as the outcome of research that answers that question. First step to develop research question require researchers to focus on topics that they are interested in studying. And then second step may be to develop some preliminary thoughts that identify gaps in researching in keeping with the reader's interests, and that may require thorough literature search. This may then lead to asking and evaluating questions and getting started with the research. A third step towards doing a research would be defining the research objective. After the research question comes, the research objective for which hypothesis could be formulated. And this research objective also serves to design your title. A title should be reflective of the research objective. The hypothesis testing in return will confirm the achievements of the specific objective. So we start with the status quo in literature as the hypothesis, and then we design the hypothesis, or we generate the hypothesis to either reject or accept according to the research design. So once we reject it, the alternative hypothesis, which is the real research hypothesis, is accepted. Other might believe research objectives come after hypothesis in order. However, objective is stated it should be measurable, general, and specific. Objective can be stated as one general and many specific objectives to cover the different aspects of the research. Generating the hypothesis. A hypothesis is formulated to predict outcome. It often requires the use of the theory or the prior evidences. Hypothesis is used to explain the phenomena, which must follow 4 criteria. First of all, it must state an expected relationship between the variables. Secondly, it must be a specific focus and testable as a true or false. Thirdly, it should be consistent with the existing body of the knowledge. And finally, it should be stated as simply and concisely as possible. So hypotheses are generated as null hypothesis or the alternate hypothesis that ensures type 1 and type 2 standard errors. And I'm sure the earlier speakers have already worked on that with you, and the concept of the error 1 and error 2 type 1 and type 2 error are clear to you. Now let's move to define what is research design. It is the overall plan to implement the research. But we have seen that research design has been described in different ways. But here I'll make your idea clear about the design. So let's see if it is about the research ingredients or chronological order. Is it about the method or the technique, and is it about the instrument of the research to collect the data? So taking you through the description of the research design is a plan and a structure of the investigation towards achieving the research outcome to answer a given question within a given time frame. A detailed outline how investigation will take place to conduct the research would include how data will be collected, what instrument will be used to collect those data, how instrument will be used, what statistical tests will be employed to analyze the data. The research design should provide information such as source and types of the data and variables, relationship among the variables, specific data collection, research methods and instruments, sample selection and size of the research sample, and the sampling method, which should also whether the research its distribution or the sample collected is randomized or not, and then the procedure and ethical requirement should also be taken into account. Now, looking at what are the types of research design. So research, as said earlier, is the overall systemic plan to implement and analyze the study to answer the question or test the hypothesis that may arise. The research design actually involves a decision regarding intervention, comparison, the data collection time, and setting and how to control the extraneous variables or the confounders' impact on research. So now let's look into the quantitative research design by method, right? So now I'm giving you the classification so that you never get confused with designs described, in different ways. So first of all, based on the method, research design can be case study, can be comparative study, which may include two popular studies, the correlational study, the cause-effect comparison study, and the single subject studies. So the next would be the quantitative research design by data collection instruments. It could be a survey research, it could be an observational study or the case study, experimental research, quasi-experimental research, non-experimental or descriptive studies, and then the action research. These all are very familiar with because the earlier speakers have talked about it. I will not go into detail. Just what as an overview of the quantitative research, I am clearing your concepts how the research design can be classified. Now let's see what is the quantitative research design by chronological order or the time. Here we can have broadly three: cross-sectional studies, the longitudinal study, and the cohort studies. Again, I'm sure you all are familiar with these terms. Now looking at the research methodology, research method refers to method of data collection and analysis in order to achieve objective of the study expected as the outcome of the research.